It's time to talk Gonzaga basketball.
Get ready.
Zag Insiders Jim Meehan and John Blanchette step away from the paper and up to the microphone to give you the biggest storylines. It's the Spokesman-Review Zags Insiders podcast.
Here we go.
Well, sure enough, it happened. We did one of these, and now the clamor from the public is absolutely deafening that we keep doing them. And by that, I mean the Zags Insiders podcast, brought to you by the Spokesman-Review. Welcome back to our second edition as the calendar makes its turn into the second month of 2022, which itself is kind of an eye-opener. Only 4 weekends of college basketball's regular season remain, and followed by the usual March bedlam and chaos until it all comes to a crashing close and usually leaves us wanting more. Let's introduce our insiders. Richard Fox, the erstwhile Gonzaga center, whose insights can be heard on various telecasts of Bulldog basketball locally on KHQ, regionally on SWX and Root. Most recently, Saturday night when the Zags romped past the University of Portland. And Jim Meehan, the Spokesman-Review's Gonzaga beat writer for the last decade and a half, and just as significant, the State of Washington Sports Writer of the Year for 2021. I'm John Blanchette, formerly the Spokesman-Review columnist, not so much an insider anymore as just kind of a cranky old hanger-on who won't shut up, but that's too long to include in the podcast title, so we don't do that. Keeping things running, providing the great visuals that aren't our faces, is the producer and Mr. Fix-It, Jesse Tinsley of the Spokesman-Review's photo staff. Gentlemen, let's wade in as is practiced with the events of the past weekend. The Zags running their record to 17-2 with a pair of victories that looked easy on the scoreboard, although I'm sure the players felt it in their bones the next morning thanks to the physical play and then some of their opponents. On Thursday, the Bulldogs took apart Loyola Marymount, 89-55. That was yet another chapter of the budding legend of Gonzaga freshman Chet Holmgren. They followed that up Saturday with a 104-72 thrashing of Portland, in which the Zags made 18 three-point baskets. That's a McCarthy Athletic Center record, if not the on-campus record. Richard, you had the call on that one. I seem to remember that one of your keys to the game beforehand was the Zags, with their decided advantage inside, not settle for early threes, except the Pilots never really gave them much of a choice, did they?
No, I mean, it was pretty remarkable what they were trying to do defensively. And you understand it, I think. You've got to pick something to try to take away when you're playing Gonzaga. I think particularly for the balance of the league, you really can't play them straight up defensively. You've got to give something up and try to shut down something else. And I just, they kept going underneath these ball screens or underneath, screens away from the ball, really just trying to make sure that they didn't get beat going to the rim. And, Gonzaga has been shooting the ball at a clip now, particularly, in conference, but even dating back with the last 9 games or so, over 44%. They just really made them pay. And you want to see them shoot with confidence. And if you're going to get those looks, you need to take them. I'm not sure that's become the bread and butter of this team, is the 3-point shot, but it's certainly, encouraging to see how well they're shooting it now, particularly given how much they struggled to start the year from behind the 3-point line.
Jim, if I can stir you from your reverie over the Rams lucking out yesterday, beating the 49ers to the Super Bowl, take us back to the bad old days of November and December when the worry beads were out over Gonzaga's 3-point shooting and that it might be their Achilles heel. That was then. This is now. The Zags numbers in WCC play are ridiculous. What's, from the players' point of view, what's changed?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for all your texts yesterday during the Rams game. Certainly alleviated any stress I might be having when we were down 10 in the fourth quarter. So appreciate that, John. Thank you.
I try and do my bit.
Yeah, you're always there for me. And that 3-point shooting has just changed dramatically in the last, well, it actually goes back quite a bit. It was before Texas Tech when they were sitting at 32.9%. And if you were going to see a strategy like Shante Leggins, the former Eastern coach, tried with Portland on Saturday, it would have been that game or that time frame. you know, you could see it then, and even to some degree now, just because Timmy is so efficient inside. The Zags want to play inside outside, have for years, that you got to try different things. And Shantae's attempt was to leave the perimeter pretty much uncovered at times. It was startling how open some of the guys were. And, you know, the Zags have been making people pay for the most part in those 8 or 9 games since. They're at 44, as Richard mentioned, 44.2% in conference. That's 6 games. It's a pretty good sample size. And then overall, just a shade under 38%. They're in the top 25 nationally now. Yeah. From distance. That is not something I thought I would have said at all this season. But when you talk to Mark Few and you talk to Brian Michelson, the thing they said throughout is it's going to be a different three-pointing shooting team than last year. You had Corey Kispert, you know, he'd hit 3, 4, 5 a game, it felt like. And you had other guys. Joel could hit them, obviously, and you know, Andrew kind of ran hot and cold, but really kind of led by Corey. Now you've got, what, they had 8 guys hit threes in both those games. That's almost unheard of. Their walk-ons can shoot threes. Matt Lang and Will Graves can shoot threes, but really it's the main 6, 7 guys in the rotation. Andrew Nemhard's going through the roof. Rasir Bolton is kind of this year's Ryan Woolridge success story from distance. He's over 40%, has been pretty much all year. And Chet Holmgren is hitting everything he shoots, and that includes 3-pointers. It was just 2-pointers before, now it's 3s, and smooth stroke. Even Timmy and Watson are throwing in 3s here and there. So in theory, that gives you wide open spaces for guys like Drew Timme to operate, who doesn't need all that much space. Kind of the irony is he's actually missed a few more field goals than we're accustomed to him, you know, kind of finishing around the rim. But I don't think there's a whole lot of worry when it comes to Drew Timme on the low block. So I think it's just another thing that people got to deal with. And, you know, for Shantae to keep that approach for 40 minutes, he did throw a little zone in there. I thought that was kind of got the Zags for a possession or two, but you know, ultimately it backfired. They scored 54 points from the 3-point line the other day.
Richard, is this just a comfort thing for the Zags? I mean, I know, you know, you take a player like Bolton, who obviously was his team's, you know, primary scorer a year ago and volume shooter and got a lot of defensive attention. I guess it's really no surprise that his percentage is up on a team like this. But is this just a comfort level issue that's something they had to settle into?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you can see a guy shoot, and you know, someone tells you his percentage and it's low, but you watch him in the gym, you get a feel for that. That's going to get better, and I think we saw that with guys right out of the gate. You know, I think Nemhard was pretty uneven starting the year shooting the ball, but you know, he's got a good stroke, and you go down the list, Hickman and certainly Bolton. It's a lot easier, I would imagine, this year to find open opportunities to score the ball than last year when he was on an 0-18 Iowa State team. But I also think it's somewhat reflective of the conference. And, you know, when you're playing Duke and these high level teams, they've got the size and athleticism to do both things, right? Is to try to compete with you inside, but also attack you on the perimeter and try to force you to put the ball on the floor, speed you up. That just doesn't exist in the league. And so I think that's part of what we're seeing here is, you know, Shantae, it was pretty dramatic watching it live, you know, what they were trying to do. But I think that approach, it's not the first time we've seen that in league play. And I don't think it'll be the last time. You've got to pick something in our conference when you're playing GU, because you just don't have the horses to try to defend them all over the floor. So I'm not surprised that that's how teams have looked to try to slow GU down, is to pick the 3-point shot as what you're going to give up. But at the same time, I'm not surprised that Gonzaga's guys are knocking them down, even if they were shooting a low percentage to start the year. I think they've got a collection of guys, maybe not a Corey Kispert level shooter, but they've got some quality shooters in the backcourt.
You know, I mentioned it was an arena record, but not a campus record. Back in 1995, in I think they beat San Francisco by 39 points. The Zags made 22 3-pointers, and in that era at Gonzaga, that was something truly remarkable.
Double the tacos. You should get 2 tacos for that.
Actually, it was burgers back in those days. You only needed 9, and they had their 9 12 minutes into the game. The poor guy down at the burger joint, you know, was really sweating. He didn't even get into his seat at tip off. But I remember John really made 7 in that game. David Cole made 6, and Dan Fitzgerald, the coach at the time, got some angry voicemails the next day because people found out that the NC2A record at the time was 23. They made 22, and while he didn't order his guys not to take threes at the end, he wasn't running any specials for threes either. And
right.
So people were upset that the chance at national notoriety went out the window. I don't think Mark Few would run specials for threes at the end either, but I think if he told his walk-ons not to shoot threes at the end, he wouldn't have any more walk-ons after this. That's what those guys live for. So let's move on. With all the threes raining down on Saturday and the Holmgren show on Thursday, maybe a little overlooked over the weekend was the continued progress of freshman guards Nolan, Hickman, and Hunter Salas. Hickman had 11 points in the LMU game. Salas 7 both nights. But beyond the scoring, it's been interesting to watch these two settle in. Both high-level national recruits who've been asked, well, not asked, they've had to adapt to support roles behind 2 veteran guards, Andrew Nembhard and Rasir Bolton. Richard, your take on the progress of these guys and what you've seen in their development so far.
Well, I mean, look, the first thing is their experience is the norm, right? I think Gonzaga with Holmgren and Suggs most recently, a guy like Zach Collins, who had a real impact down the stretch in particular. The reality is for most high-level recruits coming into college, if you're going to go to a big-time program, there's going to be that adjustment. And you're likely to play behind a guy who's been there for a while. So I haven't been surprised that those guys necessarily didn't hit the ground running and had the same kind of impact that Chet or Jalen had most recently. But if you remember, Collins, he came off the bench. Yeah. And it had a tremendous impact. An impact that was probably the best player at the Final Four. But he had to settle into that. And he had to buy into it. And it's worked out for him well. So, you look at what Nembhard could do and Bolton coming in, with his experience. And Julian clearly was ready to play. Last year just didn't get a lot of opportunity with who was in front of him. But he's the guy, if I was Hickman and Salas, I would look at is Strother and say, I had a year. He had a year where he had to kind of bide his time, and now look what he's doing and the opportunity he's getting. Now those two are getting Hickman and Salas are going to play more than Julian did last year, certainly. But that's kind of the path that most of these guys take. I've been really impressed with both for different reasons. I mean, Hickman, he's just so steady for a young guard. It doesn't feel like he gets sped up or rattled. If he misses a shot, you can't tell. If he makes a shot, you can't tell. He's just so even-keeled, and he's just got a lot of abilities. He's bigger than people, I think, realize at 6'4". He's not a high-level athlete, but he's a good athlete, and he's just got a great feel, and we see what he can do with his jump shot. And I love what Salas does. I think there's a kid who could easily be sitting, in his dorm room, kind of stewing, given what he did at the high school level. But after maybe a slow start trying to figure out what his role is, he has bought in 100%. And he's made real impacts in these games in league coming off the bench. And there's been times when he's been the first guy off the bench. I think Mark really values his energy, his length. He's way ahead of the curve for a freshman guard defensively. We've seen that. So the sky's the limit for both of them. And I certainly think the table's set for them moving forward to have obviously much bigger roles. But for what this team needs right now, they've done a good job.
Jim, Richard really touched on it, but the fact that even high-level guys have to pay their dues, especially in a program like Gonzaga's. And I know Hunter, it seemed, especially offensively, struggled early on, I know, with his shot, but other contributions. Was there ever any sense that there was some frustration with those guys building in the early parts of the season, Jim?
I don't know if frustration, but it just is that learning curve that they almost all have to go through. I mean, Jalen Suggs went right into the starting lineup, but but that's a top 4, top 5 player in the NBA draft, high level athlete. Chet Holmgren, same situation. He goes into the starting lineup, but Domas Sabonis came off the bench. Kelly Olynyk needed 2.5 years to really become the player that got into the lottery himself. Those guys, Rui, I mean, you can name up Corey Kispert. Now, Corey started early, but it was the development over 2-3 years that turned him into an NBA lottery guy, or top 15 anyway. So, yeah, it's very rare when it's more the situation. I mean, Pangos and Bell became starters because that's what they sort of had at the time. There was no veteran guard sitting there waiting in the wings to put them on the bench. Those guys immediately became starters. But the way Gonzaga is recruited, there's almost always going to be a waiting period. And what you do in that waiting period is kind of determines your role as a freshman. And you see Nolan Hickman, he's picked up his shooting in the last 3 or 4 weeks, hitting a bunch of threes. His poise is, I can't remember many freshmen like him. Gary Bell, Pangos maybe, that just kind of stay the course, look like they have, against Alabama, he might have been the best Zag on the floor for that second half, kept him around. So he's got such a bright future in his mind and ability to get others involved and guard. And that's what those two did the other day, Hunter and Nolan Hickman. Hunter had a couple of steals. He kind of sneaks down that baseline like Joel Ayayi did.
That's a good call. Yeah.
And they talked to him about that. That's kind of the role they see him in this year. His length defensively, very active defensively. He is a high level athlete. He can go. He probably just needs a little strength, but he still has a way of finishing in there. He'll get an offensive rebound or make that baseline cut and finish. So I think both guys, their trajectory is going up. I think the trust level's going up. Hunter was first guy off the bench. I don't know if that's happened in quite a long time. And Mark is insistent that his 3-point shot is just fine in practice and showing it in games a little more. So those two really on an upward swing here, and just that depth when you can bring in Nolan. Nolan runs the show now. When Andrew comes out, you don't really notice a whole lot of difference. That's a pretty good tribute to him. And then Hunter with his guarding scores it, in transition and finds his way to the rim. Those two have become pretty valuable assets for him.
Yeah, you guys' points are well taken. I do think, though, that what stands out to me is, you say, a lot of those guys in past years have had to pay their dues, the Ruiz and the Olynyks and what have you. But, these guys were very high valued recruits. And you think maybe the tenor of that had changed a little bit. They've bought in a way that all those previous Zags have. And I think that's obviously a tribute to the program, but also a tribute to those two guys that willing to show that kind of patience. From new Zags to old Zags, let's move on. The picture that on Saturday night instantly became near and dear in the hearts of Gonzaga fans started making the rounds on social media when 4 former Bulldogs, Brandon Clark, Rui Hachimura, Corey Kispert, Killian Tilly, met up on a different basketball floor in Memphis as members of the Washington Wizards, Memphis Grizzlies, who met in NBA action on Saturday night. It wasn't just a pregame pose. For, I think, about almost 13 minutes in an easy Memphis victory, the 4 Zags were in the game at the same time, and I think there was about 20 minutes of action that saw at least 3 of them playing. The 4 were all former teammates, of course, on the 2018 and 19 editions of the Zags. So I guess it shouldn't be that surprising, especially, I think Jim totaled it the other day, 7 players from 2018 have spent time in the league. But still, Jim, a special moment for everyone to see these guys playing together.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. And that one play, and I think there's video of it out there. I tweeted it out. Kispert takes a 3, misses it. Rui gets the rebound, feeds his teammate cutting down the lane. Clark swats the shot. for Memphis. Ball swings around, goes to Kispert in the corner. Tilly kind of races over on a closeout and swats it into the stands. So all four Zags combining on that play. And Clark, the first guy to go congratulate Tilly after the block. That video alone and that picture, that picture is going to find its way somewhere on the walls at the McCarthy or up in Fewey's office. But yeah, he really, he was like a father talking about those guys when he was asked about it the other night. And just look at those four guys in particular. You got two foreign players, internationals with Rui. Everybody knows his remarkable journey, learning English, kind of learning the college game and becoming an All-American. Tilly from France, injuries every time he turned around, it felt like, and just always had the skill level. And he's kind of found a nice role with Memphis. He comes off the bench. He's a dead-eye shooter. His length has really helped him. And everybody who's watched him play knows his IQ, how he passes, how he understands the game. Brandon Clark's been really good in this stretch where Memphis might be the best team in the league maybe the last month, winning games all over the place, beating good teams. And they did it without Ja Morant for a stretch. He was out, and all those guys picked up the slack, including Tilly and Clark. And then you've got Kispert and just a remarkable development story over 2 or 3 years at Gonzaga, player development. And he's kind of found his spot as a guy who can hit the three, good size, can guard some spots. Rui just getting back into it after his break for personal reasons. Very talented players. So that may be the best recruiting tool beyond NIL stuff, beyond rankings and winning streaks and NCAA tournaments. When you're recruiting the 4-star, 5-star guys that the Zags are, when you've got grad transfers out there watching and considering Gonzaga, to see 10 guys in the NBA this year, 7 off that team that we mentioned, the 18-19 team, and 3 more, I believe, that are still playing overseas. Pro ball, Perkins and maybe Jeremy Jones, that was an incredible crew of guys. So that is a pretty prideful moment for Mark Few. And another thing that's really elevated the program in the last 6 to 8 years is all the guys getting into the pros. That hasn't been the case. It'd be a couple here or there. And now there's just as Mark said, you can turn on a game almost every night, and there's a good chance the Zags are going to have some representation.
Richard, tell us about the family of Zag a little bit. You're one of the guys you put down roots here locally. And there's a number of guys that have come from elsewhere and stayed after their Gonzaga days. And between that group and the group that's still out there playing, what's different about it? Is it different from about the brotherhood of the players that played here at Gonzaga and maybe at other schools? Is there something different about the dynamic?
Yeah, I think it is unique. It crosses years and in classes and generations. Certainly you see another Zag, it's an easy conversation, and you've got that commonality between both of you. And but John, I don't think it's not just the program. I mean, certainly I think Mark and that athletic department have done a great job of being inclusive and reaching out and making guys feel as if they still have a role, an impact, or they're still part of it, right? The story keeps moving forward, and the faces keep changing, but they make guys feel, and it's genuine, that you're still part of this story. And I thought the first Final Four was really indicative of that. When everybody who was able to make it down to Phoenix, they had that quick get together with that team. That was really a cool thing to be a part of, and I'm sure I speak for all the former Zags that were there. It just meant a lot, and it certainly brought you even closer to what was going on in that moment. And I don't think that's been lost. But I think part of it is Spokane. It's not a radical idea that I stay close to where I went to college. I can get a job in that market probably easier than just putting down roots in Boston, not knowing a single person. So I think a part of that is just Spokane generally. It's a good place to raise a family, and still a relatively affordable place to live. And then when you are playing, it's a great place to come back and rehab, get a great run. It's familiar. So I think all of those things, and I'd say finally the university. I mean, I've got a lot of love for university. It's not just an athletic department thing. It's just Gonzaga as a whole. My experience there as a student, not just an athlete, but as a student, was phenomenal. So I think you blend all those things together, I think it leads to something that's pretty hard to find at other places.
Well, they're still building some legend here this season, and that rolls on this weekend. The Zags go back out on the road for two important games. On Thursday night at the University of San Diego, which is kind of the surprise team of the WCC so far, at least I guess relative to what might be known as the second division or the middle division of the WCC. And then, of course, a visit to BYU on Saturday night. Let's talk about San Diego a little bit. First of all, we don't want to overstate this. I mean, their victories this year are over Pepperdine, Portland, Loyola Marymount, Pacific. Not the murderer's row of the WCC. They haven't been able to take down one of the top four teams yet. But by the same token, I think people expected Loyola Marymount to be better. And maybe a couple of those other teams as well. San Diego's the team that stepped it up a little bit. What do we expect to see from the Toreros on Thursday night, Richard?
Well, I think your point's worth remembering. They haven't had an opportunity to see how they match up with the top half of the league. But you know what? They're winning the games that they can win, and when we get to BYU, I'm sure BYU would love to be in that position, winning some of those games that they should win. I think more than anything, it's actually getting on the road for GU and just getting tested in that way. I mean, I would expect that to be a pretty rowdy crowd. Typically when they play at San Diego does a decent job of getting folks in the gym. But I don't expect that to be all that competitive unless Gonzaga starts looking and thinking about Saturday, which I would imagine the message all week is we're not going to do that. We're going to focus on Thursday first. So we'll see. I mean, you get GU, you get the number 2 team in the country on your home floor. You never know what's going to happen. Yeah. But I wouldn't expect it to be a close game.
Yeah, Richard, looking past guy on the weekend when the important or the supposedly more important game is on Saturday, you've had to live through that a little bit. How do you combat that?
Well, ideally, you've got some maturity, and I think they do have that when you think of Nemhard and Timmy in particular. But Bolton's, maybe doesn't have the experience on a winning team in the way that he's experiencing right now, but he's been around for a while. I mean, Julian saw it last year with that team that went undefeated. I mean, there were plenty of games to overlook that last year, and they found a way not to do that. Yeah. And Mark is very good at lots of different things. I think one thing he's particularly good at is keeping his crew in the moment. I'd have to really think through a game or a stretch where it felt as if the team wasn't present in that game. In other words, they might not play well, or they just might get beat, but it's not really a part of a Mark Few team to overlook somebody. So I wouldn't expect that to happen. But it's certainly it starts early. You're not having that conversation Thursday morning. That conversation's happening today.
Yeah. Jim, BYU hit a tough, more than a bump in the road over the weekend. The losses against Santa Clara, and perhaps most damaging to Pacific on Saturday. What happened to the Cougars? How do they bounce back?
Well, to lose those 2 games. Now, Santa Clara is a quad 2. I think they're 80th in the net for a road game. But Pacific was way down. I think my best guess around 300 in the net. So that is as rough as a weekend as you can have for a team that, was pretty comfortably in the most of the brackets. I think they were 24th or something in the net. Now they're down into the 30s. I think BYU's biggest issue after the couple injuries they had to their bigger guys, Harwood and Gavin Baxter, they just don't have a lot of margin for error. They have to play very good basketball just to not only compete with the top teams, which they've done fine. They won at San Francisco, and they got blown out by Gonzaga though. But that when you don't have much margin for error, if you're not on top of your game, you can lose at LMU. You can lose at Santa Clara. Those teams are going to give you problems, and frankly, San Francisco had them down, and I thought outplayed them for more than 30 minutes of that game, and BYU rallied at the end. But I just think they don't have, multiple guys that they can bring off the bench, and they're going to give you this and that, and they don't have the inside strength they've had before. Caleb Lohner did have a nice game against Gonzaga here. He had kind of not made the jump that I think they anticipated for the first month or two of the year. They've got some good work out of a young freshman that is a big kid, played pretty well at Gonzaga. I think his name is Faust Traore. I think he's done a really nice job for him. After that, not quite the depth that they've had. You've got Barcelo, you've got a very nice transfer in Lucas that are good playmakers, good scorers. But again, if one of them has an off night, there's not a lot of places to turn to. And all that said, I can't tell you how many times I've walked in that building where I just thought I looked at both teams and hey, BYU's had good teams with Mark Pope, with Dave Rose before. Right. And just, on paper, you look at it and you're thinking, Zags by 12, by 15. And then you got 20,000 roaring in the stands and guys are throwing in threes everywhere and momentum swings. And, that team with Yoli Childs just beat Gonzaga that night. They get going and they ride that crowd and shoot it better and do all those things that they're capable of doing. I know that no matter what the rosters look like in that environment, BYU is going to come out swinging and keep swinging. And the Zags better be on it themselves because that is as good of an environment as I've ever been in anywhere, that place when it's full. You look up to the top rows, you can't hardly see it so far up there, and it's filled to the brim. So that's always one of the highlights of covering Gonzaga, is going to Provo and seeing that environment. And Gonzaga's had good success there. I think they're 7-3 in that building, but not any of them, none of those wins have been, you got it in the bag in the first half and you coast through the second. I don't remember anything like that. So it'll be a battle.
It is an emotional Band-Aid for that team, and a team that needs one right now. I think they're probably licking their wounds a lot here on Monday after a tough weekend. Yeah.
They've got San Francisco on Thursday.
Yeah.
So, this is an enormous week for BYU. They could kind of play themselves into a pretty nice seeding, make the conference race a little more interesting, or they could go 0-2 and really find that bubble life uncomfortable.
Well, guys, the clock on the clubhouse wall says it's time to another edition of Zags Insiders be put in the can. Thank you for your insights. Thanks to Jesse Tinsley for putting it all together. Check it out on the Spokesman-Review website and all the other places where quality podcasts can be found. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.